about this text. Ready? All right. Who would like to share what they heard their partner say? Go ahead. There you go.
So we were in verses 38 and 39.
So right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what stood out for
Drew?
for Drew was that the first word that Peter used, repent.
Yeah.
And the essence of repentance is not about another person, but it's about individual self. It's not about what you may have remembered or may not have remembered, but it's about just a self-emptying to God. Personally, it doesn't matter who is around, but it's about you and God.
Yeah, interesting first way to start. Nice. Yeah.
Mary talked about verse 39 and verse 47 being connected a little bit. How kind of the promise that we get is not just for us, but for all of our children and everybody who we may meet or maybe not meet.
Yeah.
And that we might be kind of forgetting about that now.
Yeah.
Just that's kind of the thing. And like it looked like they had forgotten, or they had not really received that and started to understand it, and that's how the day by day he added to their numbers.
Cool. Thanks, Mary, for connecting those verses. That's cool. What else? Yeah.
Patty had an interesting question, and so she was curious about what are people bringing to their baptismal experience. So just thinking about what is the history and the baggage that people are carrying into this community, and how does that community kind of deal and process that? Because these people the corrupt generation that are being baptized, and how does a congregation or a community receive corrupt people into the family of God?
Yeah. Wow. There's an open conversation, isn't it? Right. Or and what does that mean about repenting? Right. God, I'm just lost the words. What we imagine about other people, right? What we put on other people, right? And if they would be seen as corrupt, yet they want to come be baptized, what's that like, right? That opens up a lot. Cool. Fee.
So, so that kind of going with what you were saying, because what I in particular saw was the word baptism, and how there are things that were done back then in the Bible that I don't know how much of its relevance is in today's world. And so baptism was one of them. I think that it's necessary, but it's not actually needed. And so it's like saying, if we decide that we are going to stop baptizing people, God is not going to stop being God and saving us. So it's necessary, but not actually needed. And so
where did you hear that from the text?
Where it says repent and be baptized. 38.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like as we change and things have changed, and like you said right now, how would people receive those that come in with whatever luggage? And in my mind, it's like God loves us all, created us all, and takes us with all of our luggage. So once again, removing the power from people, we are necessary, but we are really not needed. Yeah. So that's what I thought about as you were saying that. Like, this whole power trip of the human being just needs to start getting unloaded.
I also just want to say thank you for sharing that. I want us to also remember we're going to try and share what we heard our neighbors say. This isn't about UB. This is about we've loosened that practice. So I want us to try and remember. Here's a thing I just want to say about dwelling. I'll tell you where I'm coming from. We had this conversation because we have a few faculty that don't dwell on the text very well. So we're setting up a time when this is a practice of listening as much as it is learning about, I mean, there are a lot of ways we can get into text, right? This is one of the ways, right? And so, so I want us to remember about our listening practice, right? So, okay. What other things did you hear?
Joe connected 40 and 47.
40 and 47.
Generation, and the Lord is adding to them those who saved. Or saved.
Mm-hmm. And last week, I remember there was a lot on the corrupt generation. Wasn't that one that came up a lot last time? As our second. What's one other thing we heard? Either of you want to share?
Sure.
Okay.
So,
We'll come back.
oh,
You can do too. Go ahead, Carla.
one of the things that Brigitte was caught by was the language around baptism and some of the ways that this text and some of the others get used have a lot of power to them, but also have really undergirded a lot of sort of colonial violence as well. And so there's a tension there between what they kind of mean in their time and the significance of baptizing all the nations and all the people and bringing everyone to repentance and baptism that's powerful and beautiful in that scene and can continue to have power and beauty for us, and that we always have to read them through this lens of being folks who are Christians in the late stages of the colonial age, right? And that we can't pretend like that's not part of how these texts have been used.
So would this be getting at what you were, maybe a little bit of what you were talking about, the sense of using baptism, not as a weapon, but a gate, maybe? Or putting it on someone, like you have to, the human kind of thing? Okay. Helpful to see those connections over there?
I actually think that's a really great connection to what I wanted to share. What Rita said was how it felt like an invitation, and how she saw the beauty in actually being invited, where there's oftentimes where certain folks aren't invited, and what that means to like not even get an invitation at all. How this is like an open invitation for like everyone, like we want you to take part in this like beautiful, powerful experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting to me in, I don't know how many, 6, 8 things that we have, different themes that stood out of these verses. Isn't it interesting? All present, right? With regard to that. Thank you. Let me open us with, or continue us with prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for these texts that you've given us in their complexity as well as their story form. We wonder all these years later what they say to us, what you would have, what you would want to speak to us through them, and how we can learn about what it means to be your people in this time. Lord, there are real concerns on our hearts about what it is to be your people in this day and age. There are awareness that we've had of brothers and sisters before us have used Christianity as a weapon that has been harmful in so many ways, including death for some people. Lord, we come before you on this day, bringing our own lenses and asking to repent, to come before you, asking for our eyes to be opened so that we may see what you would have us see. So we may be welcoming, not gatekeeping. So we may be passing on a message of love to generations, not reinstating a message of twisting the gospel to have it serve our own institutional or self-serving purposes. Lord, please be with us in this hour, these hours that we gather today. Be with our classmates that are not here. May we be changed because of having been together. All this we pray in your name. Amen. Thank you. So what we are going to do today is divide you up into 3 different groups. All right? And the idea is this. You have been called in some capacity to this community that we're going to learn about, or you're going to learn about. Are you with me? And you have the benefit of X number of brothers and sisters to help say, is this a place that I should go join whatever God is up to? All right? Don't sound so excited. Okay, no. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 sets of information, and you have access to computer, internet, ways to connect to the virtual resources outside of this room. Okay? So what I'm going to first do is give you these are all 3 ELCA congregations, because then I could give you, well, there's 2 reasons for that. One is I've actually done studies of these, so I had data written up on them, right? So I don't care that you find out what I find. I just find that I can give you a package of some information. So that's one. But the second is that I can give you their ELCA spreadsheet thing, right? Some of you know what those are, and it has just a snapshot of some numbers with regard to that, okay? So I'm going to give you that, and then I want you to look out online if you can figure out where these communities are, right? And what can you find out about them just looking on the internet or on stuff, right? As if you were going to do this for another congregation that you might be studying for your second paper, for example. All right. So while you're doing that, I'll put up some links they're also they're on your course site, but I'll put up some links if some of you want to follow up some of those and whatnot. And then I'm going to give you about a half hour to do this, and about halfway through or so, I will give you a narrative of what I've written up for each of these, or somebody else. I wrote 2 of them, somebody else wrote the 3rd, around some things to give you just a little bit more information. And then you're going to come back saying, who are the neighbors of this community? Describe them and what's going on. What are signs of promise? What are signs of challenge or concern? And would you want to go here, not why? Okay? Are you with me? Yep. All right, we're going to count off into 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the 2 online people are going to be just placed in one of your groups, because I already gave them some information. So I already know which group they're going to be in. I just don't know who they're going to be with. Are you with me? Let's start in that back corner, because we start in the front all the time, right? Let's see if it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1. All right, awesome. These guys are 2s. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Are you with me? So you guys are the team captains, right? How about, so 1 is Weehawken, right? Hang on. Here's your, how about if 1's staying here? Oopsie, sorry. Just, all right. 2s. Nordfree, you got 2s? All right. How about if you go down to the hall, to the room on the left? that way to the left. All right, you guys are peace. Here we go. All right. And then, Loveland, you can go in the room to the right, down the hall. All right, and I'll come. Hang on, I gotta get it right. Sign is green. All right, and 2's here. You gotta take your friends with you. All right, you guys are going down the hall, walking. Don't get seasick.
I'm here. Here's a good thing. Thinking about you. How you doing?
The room on the left. Does that mean the lounge area? Now, if you go, there's a, I don't know the number. Is it 101? 102.
Don't think I've ever been in that room.
There's great chairs.
What?
That one has great chairs.
It does. You are correct. All right, there you go. You are in. Here's your friends.
Thank you.
Oh, look at that. Hey, we are together again.
Yeah, we are.
Hi. Hey, guys.
I was muted. Hey,
Remind me, are you Carla?
Corla.
Corla. Okay, I'm Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Hi. And then we have Brigitta.
Brigitta. Yep.
Hello, David. Or Northfield.
Yes, hi.
Okay, how do we, I'm not sure how to do this. Just like this. Can you see most everybody this way?
We can see 3 people.
Can you see
Okay,
me?
what is that? Does anybody know anything about this?
Denise and Drew, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name to the left of Drew.
So, okay. Zoom cloud meetings. Okay, I think we're okay.
You'll have to let us know if you can't hear the people talking.
Okay.
So who's got the paperwork?
It's coming.
Show out.
Oh, I'm an action kind of girl.
Get it done.
So
We're supposed to decide if this is a place we want to go, huh?
we have to answer the questions.
As pastors or as people?
First we have to answer the questions.
The questions,
Which are on the slide, which are, who are the neighbors?
Oh.
Describe the neighborhood, what is going on? What are signs of promise? What are areas of challenge or concern?
Okay. What was the first question? Who are our neighbors?
Who are the neighbors?
Who are the neighbors?
Who are the people in your neighborhood? I'm glad somebody got a hold of that one.
Per confirmed.
I got you.
So there's not a lot on here about
Yeah.
the neighbor,
Statistics, yeah.
but what are signs of promise? Like we can look at the data of baptism and membership and stuff like that.
It looks like something funky happened between 2006 and 2008 kind of time, where their worship attendance jolted up, but their membership fell a ton. And it makes me think of where I'm serving now. Wonder if they like clean their rolls for the first time in a while, or if there's a merger situation. I would want to know more about, like, looking straight at these numbers, I would want to know about those things in particular.
That must be true. They must have cleared out their rolls. They must have, because if the participation is going up. That's on page 3 that she's looking at.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. The blue little bar charts.
But we don't have color, we have black and white.
Oh, well, that sucks.
Well, you're just comparing worship attendance to baptized membership, right?
Yeah, just noting those. I don't think I have an assumption about what those mean, but the fact that they are inverted from each other makes me want to know what that's about. And I can think of a number of things that could mean in terms of the congregation. But I don't. But I would want to ask if I saw that.
Yep.
What would, do you have that?
Just about the neighborhood a little bit. I went to school in Tacoma. I don't know this church, but the neighborhood Hilltop that it's in, very poor, diverse, kind of a ghetto, actually, like lots of drugs and it's not the safest neighborhood, I guess.
Well, and if you look at their demographics, that plays out. It plays out. We've got a really colorful community represented.
Does somebody have a computer that I can show you where the resources are for the external things? Stacey, can I?
She just needs to learn.
No, I just need, yep, just go into that class and I'll show you. Okay.
And in terms of I don't know a ton about the Seattle-Tacoma area, but in terms of that dynamic, historically, like Tacoma has tended to be more. Am I right in thinking that Tacoma has tended to be more working class, has tended to be have more people of color, has tended to be less structured around the tech industry in some ways? Is that all accurate?
Yeah.
I don't know where I picked that up, but osmosis.
Well, it's right on the water, so it's probably.
I'm having trouble hearing whoever's talking. Sorry.
Nothing significant to be heard right now. It's right on the water, so I don't know if there's a port there. But if there is, like, I can understand if there would be a lot of work going into that. So yeah, it makes sense if there's
Yeah.
higher working class.
Sorry, if I may ask, so who is going to take note? Oh, okay.
She's doing
I started.
Yeah.
good. Very good question. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how we're moving ahead here, but the giving, if you look at the finances on page 2 of 4, notice that they're not as well supported. It doesn't look like there's much partnership support, so maybe they adjusted their ties with the synod. I don't know, but if you notice, like the 4th, see where it says grants and partnership support. Now that could indicate that the synod decided that they needed to go on their own, or it might mean that they decided not to apply for grants. It could mean, but you'll notice it's a 62% drop. Yep. Yeah. Also, their designated giving has dropped by 23%. So what's that all about?
I think that's a challenge.
So we in the online world don't have access to the questions. Could someone who has them just read them again?
Yeah, please. Just a moment. Can we get to that?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you closer to her so you can hear her.
Oh, thank you.
So they're actually in the presentation for today, which is on the website.
Yeah, and they're not in PDF form. I can't open them, unfortunately.
It is a PDF.
It is? That's fantastic.
Let me double check.
Usually they've just been PowerPoints, so that's great.
I think this one, pretty sure this one was a PDF.
Kick-ass. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a PDF. But the questions are, who are the neighbors? Describe the neighborhood, what is going on? What are signs of promise? What are areas of challenge or concern?
Thank you.
You bet.
There they are.
So I'm trying.
And also, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine.
Also, under the finances, the one but last aspect there where you have all other benevolence, non-mission support is also a very serious challenge.
Mhm.
Sorry, you wanted to share something.
Well, I'm trying. She alluded to using some of the links off the resource sheet that we have for our projects. I'm trying to access some of that stuff, but it's the American Fact Finder she has on there does not link. And the other one only shows like the boundaries of the community.
So what are we looking on the American Fact Finder? Is that just for the neighborhood?
Well, just trying to get information about.
Yeah, I just got in, so I can.
Oh, okay.
Tacoma, Washington? That's
Tuck-
us?
Tacoma.
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 I got- Okay, and we got a zip code, right?
Yeah.
98405. And actually, the community does not butt up to the water. The boundaries of that community. But let's see.
I mean, Tacoma in general, but the neighborhood, the church is in.
Some of the neighborhoods, no, it's actually quite a ways off the water.
Oh.
So there's other zip codes which might be associated with Tacoma.
Oh, okay.
All right, so it wants to give me. Okay, here we go. Let's try it this way then. Oh, okay. The zip code has 22,851 in it.
So what is called their church? Well, how many members do you have? What's it like?
So it seems like based on the trend reporting in particular that we have access to, in terms of looking for challenge and promise, like the fact that clearly something significant happened in the mid 2000s, and they are not in a tailspin. They seem to be fairly stable, and in fact even growing in some kind of healthy and manageable, not out of control ways. That to me seems to be a sign of promise, right? Like there is a bit of unevenness of some sort, and we don't know why, and that's fine. There's a bit of unevenness, and that didn't throw them off fully. So something in terms of how they responded to that, it seems like was healthy and positive. That would look to me, just from these numbers, like a sign of promise.
Yep.
They know how to handle disruption well.
Okay. Yeah, see, it's just playing out. These demographic are kind of playing out what she said, that it's a mix. There's a slight edge white population. Let me go back here.
I think an advantage they have is that they are so diverse.
Yeah.
They can reach out into so many different factions of their community.
They match the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have we identified the goals from here?
Well, I think the identification that this is a diverse group of people that are blue collar workers.
And I got a place where they have it's a diverse church, multi-ethnic and multi-generational too. committed to health and fatality of the Hilltop Church. You call yourself Hilltop.
How are we able to determine the age?
So have you got the name of the church?
Yeah,
It's on the front page.
Lutheran Church.
I missed that too.
On their website, yeah, it says what you just said, multi-ethnic, multi-generational.
Committed to health and vitality of Hilltop.
So what are areas of challenge or concern that they may have?
When you're ready, here's some narrative.
Oh, we're ready.
Okay. And these guys already have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Challenge?
Do we want to talk any more about it before we look at this? See if we can.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we mentioned
Terry, we're one short.
the financial aspect.
Okay.
Okay, so the challenges.
I know, never mind. They were stuck together.
I have been losing my mind. I could be losing my
So what did we determine as the challenges?
The non-mission support and grants and partnership support is found down significantly.
Is there diversity a challenge? I mean, is that something you would look at as not necessarily a negative challenge, but just a walking into it knowing that this is not going to be a
homogenous.
Homogenous. That was the word I was trying to think of.
They state on their website that they are diverse.
Yes.
So it's all over there. So if you go in there not knowing that, I think that's your own fault.
Right, but what I'm saying is that you need to go in knowing that so you're prepared. It's something you would need to be prepared for. It's not necessarily a negative, but be prepared for it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a challenge.
Can you say that a little louder? I'm sorry, I'm having
So we're
trouble.
talking about the diversity of the congregation possibly not being a challenge in a negative way, but something that you want to be prepared for going into.
Oh yeah, I mean, and certainly something that the congregation had better be aware of. And
well, and I think too,
like
depending on what kind of a pastor they're going to call or what they wish to call as their leader, is that going to represent their diversity?
So looking at their staff page right now, I think related to this, the only white folks on their staff are the pastor. So that sets up in terms of like the ordained versus lay staff dimensions in a church, especially a church like the ELCA that pretends we're not a clericalist church, but really very much are. That is, and where pastors are heads of staff. Their head of staff is the only white person on staff. And so that certainly, there's no way that doesn't play out, right? In some ways.
Right.
Whether just at staff meetings or in the broader congregation in terms of the priorities of the congregation, whose cultural terms worship and meetings are run on, and like that's going to show up in a bunch of different ways.
Now, page 1 of 4, if we look at Brown Baptist, the youth confirmed, the last one, the percent attending worship.
So it jumped and then it dropped.
Yeah.
I think if we looked at the overall numbers though in the ELCA, that's probably a typical number. Oh, okay. I mean, it's nothing to not think about, but I don't think it's, I don't know. I don't know what the report is for that. Do you guys know if there's a name of a report for like the overall numbers for ELCA?
I don't know the name of it. I'm sure it exists somewhere. I'm sure Exposing the ELCA has very well kept data on our decline. As usual, it's the place to learn all the best things about the ELCA. Would it be possible just to restate the piece that you're looking at right now, though I couldn't quite hear you, Venetius, when you said, I heard page 104 and then didn't hear quite what you were specifically looking at.
He was looking at the attendance report on the bottom. So he was talking about the decline in attendance. So the negative number of 17.9%, even though they had that jump, they still have had a decline.
Okay. Got it.
And then that's where the conversation came of it possibly being a number that's pretty close to the overall number for the ELCA.
Yeah.
Attendance, age of ELCA attendees, attendance.
So that's a interesting number, because like the worship attendance has stayed the same effectively. Yeah. They just have more members. And I think that reflects in I think that definitely is notable, because like how many of your people attend worship is important, but also I think that's a growing reality, that in more and more congregations, what it looks like to be a faithful worshiping member, like a consistent worshiping member, less and less often means every Sunday, and more often means 2 to 3 Sundays a month kind of thing. And that might be, so their membership is increasing, and probably a significant number of those folks are coming regularly. It's just not every week regularly. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I also think about like my context right now, we have a Wednesday night service. Where most of our families come. So they're like the newer people who are becoming members, but we don't take attendance in the same way. And so it's possible I don't know, I didn't read the narrative part of it that closely, but it's possible that they also are not taking attendance at all of the things that people are showing up to, or like what that looks like. I think it is really surprising that they've kind of held strong in this, like according to their average worship attendance. Those bars on the bar graph on page 3 of the trend report is relatively consistent over the last 10 years. Past whatever jump they had, whatever like significant change happened, they've held up their attendance. And their membership continues to grow, which is surprising.
But in like sustainable ways. Or rate. I don't know the ways, but like.
Yeah. Right.
Like although their membership and worship has stayed the same, their giving is down.
Where are you looking for?
The giving is on page 2 of 4.
Yeah.
Ooh. Thank you.
I shouldn't say that. The designated giving members are down, but
where is the giving down?
The designated giving by members.
The designated giving by members is down, but the overall numbers are up. That's my error. But that grant and partnership support is pretty significant.
Do we know what this is just my ignorance, I've not been working in ELCA context the last couple of years. Do we know what the difference, what means that some things are regular giving versus designated giving?
So
answer those questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Terry, can you clarify? Terry, can you clarify regular giving versus designated giving?
Yep. Regular giving would be offering, can go to anything.
Yep.
Designated would be, I'm giving this for world hunger or for a project.
That's
so
what I thought.
It's,
okay.
What?
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
I did. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we better breeze through the narrative because we really haven't talked about that.
And tell them it's just the first few pages. They have the whole thing.
Yeah. So we're gonna quick breeze through the narrative because we only have 10 minutes left.
And you guys, it's just the first 5 pages of it.
Okay.
It goes into more specifics beyond that, just the context and the congregation part.
Okay.
Okay. Wow. Page 5.
Page 5.
Back page.
Okay.
But you can read awfully fast.
No, I've been reading it all along.
Oh, that's interesting. Military base.
Get my pen. Are we going back to the original questions then? Just following up on those?
Sure.
So let's go back.
The first question, who are the neighbors?
And I think we kind of got
We've
that.
kind of nailed that down, but one thing I did read in there that they house a military base.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder how significant those numbers are on the base. Describe the neighborhood, what is going on.
The base isn't super close.
It's not. So why are they mentioning it?
It's in Tacoma. Tacoma's huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Where there's a base that impacts the whole community.
They're just talking about like.
As in general.
Tacoma
Okay.
area.
Well, it says, it's what's interesting, it says that it's primarily Caucasian, around 65%, which is, it's the majority.
The city of
Yeah,
Tacoma.
it's the majority, but it's not necessarily a huge majority. So it's just interesting, that's all.
And then describe the neighborhood, what is going on, what are signs of promise, and what are areas of challenge or concern.
Its longevity maybe is a sign of promise, that it's there, and it has an identity in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So what did we answer in describing the neighborhood? What is going on? Maybe
Who are the neighbors?
Yeah, what's going on? I think
Well, we've talked about that it's a multi-ethnic,
blue collar,
yeah,
and lower income.
well, lower
yeah.
and middle class.
Yep.
So blue collar and lower.
Yep.
So lower socioeconomic, possibly.
I would add that part too from where it says Russians and
Yep.
Okay.
And then,
German Russian immigrants.
yep, German
Yeah.
Russian immigrants. And then after World War II, African American vets.
Now there's
And then in the 90s, like the drugs coming up from LA. So it's been a transition. Like every generation has seen a new people are added. A new
So is it, do you know anything about Tacoma as far as like it being a port town? I mean, is it still actively?
Yeah, there's a port. Yeah. Like it's really industrial down by the waterfront.
And then there's also a college area too. So this person was talking about how there's diversity in neighborhoods. Like in his hotel, it's right by like, neighborhood's very tired. The houses need
Yep,
Yep.
saw that.
Yep. Although the Hilltop neighborhood has the PLC Lutheran
Right.
right in that area.
Yeah.
So the college is nearby.
Yeah.
No.
No?
No. It's confusing how this person has worded it.
Oh, okay.
It's the University of Washington, and that is down by that's where like he or she just talking about like the Museum of Glass and like
Right.
it's kind of swanky. It's not. That's not Hilltop.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's just
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep.
So talking about the promises, on page 1 there, after the introduction, there are a few things we look at them. Their perception of life. There is this value. And then you also see that though there is a change, but then the care for neighbors has not changed, stay the same. And then there is support.
Wait a minute. What were the years that you noticed the dip?
2006.
Yeah.
Well,
Was that possibly going into the recession?
No, that was December 2008.
From 2006 to 2007, there was an inverted attendance thing that went
So
down.
2006, if it's the same as like the ELCA at large, that was when a lot of congregations left.
Dropped down.
In 2006?
I thought it was
That was-
2009.
No, that was 2009
Okay.
and
There
10.
was something, it was like either a vote or a precursor to the vote.
In 2006.
Okay.
I think we've done good.
I've got all kinds of stuff all over my page.
Yeah.
It's all on her shoulders.
Give me a push.
So, to add to that, in Joshua statement, it's also a people who have experienced many changes.
Yeah. Yep. I have that one.
So we don't have the evidence of what happened in the 1970s that the thing was, we don't have any data that tells us what happened. Attendance must have dropped, involvement must have dropped, do we assume? And then the drugs, gangs, and violence took over in the 80s and 90s.
Another sign of promise from this reading. And we talked about how one of the members' houses got burned down.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. The church rebuilt it and, or, fixed it. Like, they're answering the needs of the community.
Yep. And they built the gymnasium for the youth instead of fixing up their worship space. Community meal program.
So they're very community oriented.
Yep.
Yeah.
Emphasis on meeting people's
much.
physical and social needs through food, clothing, and fellowship.
You said food, clothing, and
Fellowship.
thank you. Do you find anything else on the
There's
website?
many teachers and educators in the congregation, so their emphasis is education, one of their emphasis.
Teachers and educators.
Mhm.
We have one other question remaining. Oh, you're done.
Did we answer them all?
I don't. We really hung on to the promise, but I guess that we didn't really touch on a challenge or concern.
The financial.
The financial.
Concern the financial.
We did talk a little bit about just the inherent challenge of being a multiracial congregation.
Yeah, okay.
That many congregations assume that isn't going to be a challenge because they're in that minimization place, and so if this congregation is taking seriously being a multiracial congregation, there are going to be hard conversations about how do we structure our time, what are our priorities, how does decision making happen, what does it mean that our head of staff is the only white person on staff, and those are definitely challenges.
Sure.
Well, and is the neighborhood a challenge? I mean, the socioeconomic situation, which we did allude to the finances, but just the struggles of daily survival.
Yeah, I would
How
think
long
so.
can they sustain that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if people are coming, and have experienced drive-by shootings.
Right.
Oh, yeah, the
Right.
psychological.
Right, like what, and.
Identity.
Yeah, the bullet hole in the pulpit.
Yeah,
the window
yeah.
behind the pulpit, like
Yeah.
actual physical signs of danger.
But they too, just like our Maplewood congregation at our last meeting, they were faced with a closing. And they kind of claimed their identity because of that potential, do you think? I mean, I'm just conjecturing, but it sounds familiar. What we talked about last week.
All right,
Yeah.
we gotta head back.
Yes, sure.
Thanks for
being
your record.
It's gonna sound really disjointed, so.
We'll help you.
We'll help you.
Yep. Okay, we'll walk back now. Here we go.
For 100 years, that's pretty good.
I do like these chairs.
They are.
Much more comfortable.
They originally said that they were gonna replace them all in all
Yeah.
these classrooms.
Uh-huh.
They haven't.
Oh, she's already at the front of the classroom, guys. We're late.
We can use them as a crutch.
Well, maybe not. Maybe they haven't started it up.
Yes.
Awesome. We're back.
Traveling mercies.
Oh, okay. Can I just hand that off to you? Just put them right here.
Actually, I'll put them right here because we're gonna do on the board again.
Okay. So which one were you guys? You guys were.
Two.
These are actually all real pictures from your location.
Yeah.
This is
I can tell.
a park in Weehawken that I drove up and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, there's New York City. Like, it's just like, hello. We're waiting on one more group. The flight must be late from Colorado. I sure did. You know, when you, okay. But. Yeah.
Come on.
We had one game. There was this group of was Samoan, and then there was a Hispanic gathering, and then the gathering, and I believe they have all three were quite small. I believe they will come together, and I think the Hispanic group is somewhere else now, but the Hispanic
Did you guys have the biggest service yesterday?
So it's, yeah, it's they still have some
All right, Colorado's on his way.
So, but yeah, they're still close.
How was Virginia?
That's great. The leaves were still pretty.
It's nice to know that.
Yeah, on Friday, especially when we were driving through the hills. I know, we were wondering if the Colorado flight was delayed.
Oh, no. Yeah, right? We had a layover.
Yeah, layover. Weather in Denver again.
Cool.
All right. Yeah. We're gonna hear about them in this order. All right. Of these questions. All right. So I'll just jot some notes, and because I want us to just get a picture of each of them, and then we'll look at the three. So Weehawken, tell us about the neighborhood. What are the signs of promise or challenge?
So, Good Shepherd in Weehawken is a congregation that is right on the border of New Jersey and Manhattan. You'll see in the picture up above, you can literally, drive across the bridge and be in Manhattan in 20 minutes.
There's a river between them.
There's
That's
a
the
river.
border. Yeah. I wouldn't swim it, but you could.
And it's probably not safe, so don't do that.
Yeah.
And that puts this congregation kind of on a borderline between a very affluent neighborhood and a very kind of impoverished, diverse neighborhood that has very different needs and demographics. The actual neighborhood that the congregation sits in, the average median salary is $75,000. The sale of homes is average $850,000 in this neighborhood. So property is at a premium. The congregation itself is very unique, that it is fairly diverse. The Caucasian population of the congregation is actually the minority. Only 68 members of a congregation of 209 as of 2014. And they have two different, services that on Sunday mornings, and one is in Spanish. The later worship service is in Spanish. Some of the promise is they are recently debt-free. And so they are no longer having to pay on debt, and they own everything that they have, which really gives them opportunity to do, or freedom to do different types of ministry. I think they're trying to do ministry with a diverse population, and trying to figure out what that is and what that means to be a congregation with means, to be also maybe this bridge builder between more affluent families and families who are struggling or trying to figure out how to do life in different ways. And so we have some questions or concerns. We're curious about how integrated are the two services? Are we looking at maybe like these two separate congregations under the same household, in which the Caucasian families are not really integrating into the Latino community of the congregation? We're wondering about, is there problems with this economic differentiation between, there's diverse congregation, and so who's in power or who's in leadership we were kind of looking to see if we could find the council online, and they didn't list that online. So we're just curious who is leading this congregation. We do know that the pastor is a German native, and she certainly is doing very interesting things. They're doing a lot of education around languages in their neighborhood, and so that's good. We're curious about how can they outreach to other diverse representation in their neighborhood, so like Asian communities and the African American community, because they're basically non-existent. And so really looking at reaching the depth of their diversity.
Thank you. Would your sense be, you maybe didn't ask this question, but would this be a place you would want to do ministry in, or no? Was there some of you in that group that want to speak to that? You don't all have to, and just say why. Just share a little bit about what was intriguing to you, what was curious, some of those kinds of things. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't, because I imagine there would be a lot of traffic out there. But,
there is a lot of traffic, even on Sunday.
But one of the other things that I think would be interesting to look at would be the number of, because of the population density, there's probably an increased number of churches as well.
Yeah.
And so it would be interesting to see this church functions having two services that offer in Spanish and English. I would be interested to know, because these neighborhoods have such a high Hispanic population, there's probably a number of churches that only have Spanish services. And so it would be interesting to see how this church, I guess, does ministry alongside other churches in the neighborhood. I think that would be a challenge, but would also be, an area of partnership. But so that would be kind of difficult to fill.
Nice speak.
I think that it would be a good church to go to, because it is debt-free right now.
Yeah.
So now we can actually use the money
Yeah.
coming in to
Yeah.
fix those problems
Yeah.
that we mentioned.
Yeah.
We can be intentional about how can we get the rest of the population and be more.
Yep.
I agree with that. I think they're in a good place. And like, I personally would like them.
And what would be interesting to you? Like, what was it about that they like, oh, that would be really, like, drawn to it or
I
whatever?
actually would really like to work in a congregation that has both English and Hispanic population. Whether it's down in Texas or
right. So that drew you to it.
Yeah, that's really interesting to have and to have it. It reminds me of my neighborhood in Houston, honestly, because we have that same kind of distinction of population. Not necessarily reflected in my congregation down there right now, but
Mary, you were in
and I would not care to worship there nor work there, in the sense that it seems that it would be a tremendous challenge as far as the outreach. I'm concerned, according to the stats that we were given earlier, from 2011 to 2014, the African American community in that particular ministry went to 0, and it was only just a bit less than 10. And so that's extremely small. So it concerns me that there perhaps is certainly not enough, if any, effort toward outreach of the diversity issues being met. And how many years has it been like that? So there would be some concern going forward. Not that I wouldn't go, but I would desire.
Yep, I hear you. That's good. Yeah.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. Thanks. This is an interesting congregation. It's literally right on the edge of Weehawken, that, like, if this is the street and this is the corner, it's here, and you go across the street and you're out of Weehawken. So literally the affluence is more in Weehawken and whatever, I can't remember the next community,
Union City.
Is significantly lower income. So literally they are at a street, kind of in between with that. It is a place where a ton of So this is New York City, Ellis Island, like is right here, literally. And this has been hundreds, very old church. That this has been a place where immigrants have come as they've come in to the United States. So there's been a lot of turnover in this community. So some of the non-affluent population, it's too expensive for most people to live in Weehawken. I mean, it's, as you noted, right? It's very high, the property. But so they'll see a lot of first and second immigrant families, and then they may stay and find a place in the larger community, or they may move on. And so there's a lot of turnover in some of those spaces. So that was an interesting kind of piece. Did it say, I can't remember how long the pastor had been there. She's been there quite a while.
1990.
Yeah.
And unlike other, like Lutheran church, because people when I worked in seminary relations, that they have a nice list of the full staff. It's only her.
It's only her.
Church.
You got
Only
it.
her.
You got it. She's an amazing, crazy, fun lady. And that she's from Europe. I mean, it's just, she's this really eclectic kind of woman. I mean, she's a global citizen in herself, I think is situates her in a unique place with regard to that. I love her thing is she's like, there are no models for what I'm doing. You make it up every day, you know? And so kind of tenacity of her as a leader really shown through to get it to where they are. So anyway, Weehawken, very interesting place in a very interesting synod that's very diverse in rural, urban, different ethnic makeup and different socioeconomic places in the Synod of New Jersey. So it's very interesting. Recently now, I think she has a few other partners of congregations that are doing similar stuff, but I think for a long time she was kind of the only one doing this kind of stuff in her neck of the woods, which is kind of gives, I learned a lot from Weehawken. So that was really fun. All right, Tacoma, who's our Tacoma group? Raise your hand if you're the Tacoma group. And then our online people, right there. I'm gonna move you over because, there we go. See if I can. You maybe can't see anything, but I'm trying. All right, Tacoma, tell us about your neighborhood.
The neighborhood consists of an industrial area, colleges, and port. Port.
Big boats.
Yeah. So, which is still active today. They sit kind of set back. The congregation itself sits back off the water, but pretty much it's kind of almost like a peninsula where they're located. They have a blue collar neighborhood, so it's middle to lower class socioeconomics. The demographics of the church actually matches the neighborhood as far as diversity. One thing we did note that the staff, and I just double checked the council, the staff is very multi-ethnic, with the pastor being a Caucasian male. But the council is diverse, but there are more white members than there are than ethnic members. We noticed a trend in 2006 to 2008 where the attendance went up, but membership went down. So we're not sure if that was something where they maybe had cleaned the rolls. But there was also a discussion that was a precursor to the vote on same-sex marriages. So we didn't know if that had an effect on it or not. They have minimal debt in their congregation compared to their assets. And they are committed to reaching out into the community. They've had stable growth in their congregation. But they have had a drop in non-mission support and designated giving. So it sounds like the membership is made up of a lot of teachers and educators. So we didn't look at any median numbers, but I'm guessing with the median number in the congregation as far as income is probably higher than actually the people that they serve in their neighborhood. So the challenge is, well, the promises that we've noted were their value of life, no matter who it is. The climate of the neighborhood has changed over the years, but their service to the neighborhood has not. They had noted in their narrative that in the 80s and 90s there was a dramatic increase in violence, gangs, and drugs. Let's see. So in some of the ways that they show that they reach out, they do a breakfast every Sunday between worship services. They reached out to a member whose home had burned down and the church rebuilt it. They rebuilt a gymnasium for the school. But the challenges that we've kind of identified would be that the pastor is the only white person in leadership or lay leadership. That their giving is down, but I'm wondering, this was a wondering that I came up with, is that are the monies going right into the community rather than coming to the church and being funneled through?
They do have a nonprofit. Did you get that?
No, I didn't.
Their center.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the community center.
Yeah. And so it could be that some of it's being done through that. Yeah.
And we also talked about maybe some of the psychological needs of the community around maybe safety in the neighborhood. And then we had a brief discussion on the socioeconomic needs and how long they can sustain reaching out, but keeping membership.
Anything else from any of the rest of you in the group? Nice job, Stacy. Thank you.
I noticed they have vibrant worship. They really invest in their music.
Says the worship and music person.
Yes. Well, I know it's mine.
No, that's good.
That's my territory.
Me.
That was speculation.
Anything from you two online? No? What's your sense about those that were in this group about serving there? Would this be an interesting place to serve, and why? Yes, no? Yeah.
Well, for me, if you consider the sense of community, and of course, being somebody who likes worship, it's a good place to start from.
Yeah, that there's some assets to work with that would be life-giving for you as a leader. Okay? Yeah, yes. Okay.
It's a mission. You'd have to go into it with a mission mindset.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't be going there to settle into a annual income that supports your family necessarily. It would be a mission project.
So it's a missional understanding of what it is to be church. Yeah. Okay. What else? Yeah, Rita.
Yeah, for me, I think this church is a neighborhood church.
Yeah.
You know, when you read programs that they are undertaking, first of this kind, I usually hear outreach. There is from this background, I got to even go deep in English.
Yeah.
You know, they have both the English and the outreach. Yeah. And they are doing them together.
Yeah.
Doing the both of them together.
And that's exciting for you.
Yeah, that is very exciting for me.
Yep.
And more involved in the outreach, not far from them, but within the neighborhood.
Yeah, right. Right next door.
Yeah.
Yep. You might be catching on why I picked some of these congregations. But I mean, But sometimes it's like, church, do you get it? And there are people work in this. I mean, you know, and that's, I think, a good example.
What was interesting, the story that they gave though, is that, which I think is a key example of this congregation, is that they have, there's crime and drugs and everything, and they have a bullet hole behind their pulpit that people can see. So, and their worship, their sanctuary space is decaying and they're falling apart. But instead, they invested their money in a youth gymnasium rather than fix up the worship. So that is very exciting that they invest that way.
Well, and I think
they used to have a bullet, right? Like, did I read that wrong? There was for a time. They aren't like keeping it there as a.
There is some place on the campus that has it though.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where. Yep. But I think it gets at this piece, the value of life over buildings, right? Or where's the place to invest that multiplies, right? Kind of, I think that's the tension that they're trying to balance. I think you said that well. You're smiling. Ian knows this area.
That's where I grew up. So it sounds like Tacoma. But
right?
No, but yeah, and I don't know specifically where Tacoma is, but Tacoma is very large, and certain areas are
right.
I mean, you can drive for 10 minutes and it's a whole different Tacoma.
Yeah. This is in a less prime neighborhood.
Which is where I am, as was mine.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
You can tell when you get
so,
to neighborhood headquarters.
Yeah.
What kind of neighborhood you're in.
Go ahead, Carla. Thank you.
Can I raise that I'm maybe a little uncomfortable talking about this specific church and this neighborhood as a missional space? For me, like, when we talk about doing the work of the gospel, that space sounds a hell of a lot easier than, say, the suburbs in terms of actually turning on a community to do the work of liberation and to live the gospel call of Jesus Christ and witness with both our worship and our outside of Sunday lives to the gospel. This doesn't sound to me like a mission field.
Yep.
Suburban church sounds to me like a mission field.
Yep. Carla, I agree with you. And I didn't hear her say mission field. I hear this is a missional community. This would be a call to a missional community. And I would just say, personally, I see those as different things. And that, so I would say yes to both of you.
Okay. I maybe misunderstood it. I just like the ways that we're talking around what we're saying with this neighborhood is starting to set me on edge a little bit. So.
No, Carla, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think to bring in what Aretha was saying, what I appreciate about this and why I would call it a missional community, right, is that there's this conversation between how are we forming disciples, right? How are we calling people to Jesus Christ and being church with one another? And how are we serving our neighborhood of which we're located? And those are put in conversation always. I mean that's in theory, right, behind this congregation. So for me, that would be a balance of the missional community. I think a mission field is a different set of questions, right? And I think, Cora, you bring up a really good distinction between how we're using our vocabulary, right? And this church, or this class, it's really important. Yeah, go ahead.
Is the membership trend decreasing?
I'm sorry.
Is the membership trend decreasing?
No, I think the question was during this time period, there were some weird numbers that they were trying to understand what was happening during that time. Do we know if it's how the membership has overall?
It remains steady.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another example, and that for me, I would read of this community, which I think fits into that missional community understanding. This congregation doesn't be in partnership with its neighbors, so it gets members on the rolls. You know what I'm saying? So that we get more people that we can report to the ELCA or that we can give in our budget or whatever, right? I think the conversation is really different, and I think that's what I hear this question to be about. Is the community, the membership, the people that are sharing the ownership and leadership of this community, is this a sustainable long-term quest for what this is? Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah?
Yeah, well, and it's kind of ironic because the community that I'm looking at potentially serving, this is exactly the thing, where they have resources, but they're not using them in a way that's good for the community.
Got it.
And so, in long term, is what they're doing sustainable? You're not. It's not necessarily missional work because they're so inward focused. At least these guys are out and doing the work, and so then the question becomes to the ELCA. So
what's
how
sustainable?
are we gauging that?
Right. So the question you're asking is this.
Yeah.
V, did you want to add?
I think what I wanted to find out, if it can be clarified to me, is then what is your definition of mission? Because I'm trying to put both statements that were made for it to make sense to me, and they both sound very opposite. So I'm trying to figure out what is mission? What is a mission? What is missional? No,
That's
real
this
question.
class. That's what this class is. And we don't have one definition, right? We're using the word in different ways. I would say a missional community is joining God's mission in the world, right? So what's God's mission in the world, right? And I would say, personally, it's both forming disciples, right? Calling people to Christ, and serving and loving God and serving our neighbor, right? So for me, those two go together in mission, right? What has traditionally been called mission outreach and evangelism, or discipleship, and that, right? So for me, it's both of those things, but that's my definition. Part of what I'm inviting you in this course is, so what does it mean to lead Christian communities in mission? That's your theological task of this class. And I'm inviting you to say, rooted in your theology, right, of who we see God to be, and then wonder, what does that mean, right? And so part of, I think, what Corla was calling us to, and what others have done over the course of our class so far, is we've used terms prior to this class in a variety of ways, right? Missions versus mission can mean two different things, right? Missions can be a program, can be a specific set of activities, right? Mission, at least when we put it into God's mission or to the church's mission, is a different thing than missions. Does that make sense? That S makes the difference with regard to that, right?
So when she said when you said this church is missional, is because it was already interacting and being interactive with the community.
Yes. Yeah. And where we're gonna,
what Corla was saying is that the word mission in her definition was that it is easy because the work is already being done, whereas a real mission is when we are at a place where that doesn't exist, and for us to get that stuff.
Yes, exactly. That's what she was saying. She's more frustrated or feels a more mission filled of turning an inward facing church to the world. That's a shorthand, maybe. I don't want to.
I can't hear.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree, having served in the suburbs. That is really hard to do. All right, look, we're going to go to one more, and then just to this point, and where we're going to spend the last part of our time is on a theological, Trinitarian theological concept that says, why do we think this community, this dynamic between inward and outward facing together is important? So we're going to go theology at the end. Where would I root this in? All right, here we go. We are now going to the middle of the country, to Loveland, with the lovely mountains in the back. All right, who's our Loveland group?
Loveland, Colorado is a growing community. In 1960, it was slightly under 10,000 people. In 1980, it was about 30,000, 2,000. The census was 50,000, and now it's around 75,000. So they've grown a lot in the last 50 years. The people who don't like the growth have probably up in mountains.
Yep.
It's an hour to Denver.
They just get out of the city limits.
It's an hour to Denver, So it's very very easy commute distance. It's half an hour up to Fort Collins. So it's kind of big in between. So you probably have some bedroom community going on. And the other thought we had was those boomers who start retiring, they want to go somewhere interesting. Loveland may be on their map.
Like 15 minutes from Estes Park.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Recreational
Estes
opportunities.
Park would be up this way, in those of you that don't know your Colorado geography.
Recreational opportunities and cultural opportunities.
So this is a side story, but one of my friends that I did ministry with married a guy from Loveland, and they live out there. And like on his day off, he gets up early, drives up the mountains, hikes a peak, and comes home. Really? That's what you do on your day off? I like rake leaves. I don't know. Like, anyway. So it's doable from there, right? Yeah.
60% of the county is religiously unaffiliated. And that.
Could you say that number again?
60% of the county is religiously unaffiliated, which is a huge, it's a promise, and it's a challenge, but it's an interesting characteristic of this new place. There are 11 ELCA congregations in the Loveland, Fort Collins area, as well as a plethora of other options.
For this 40% that do go to church.
Yeah. But there's
No.
not poaching from the neighboring church down the street, potentially. You're got mission opportunities for people who aren't affiliated. It might be, let's hear something new. They had some interesting numbers. And in fact, a new pastoral team came in 2008, explained a lot of those interesting numbers. A clergy couple, and because they got some good energy, significant staff, energy, enthusiasm, a real emphasis on cross-generational activities and faith formation for everyone. And both what's building our community here and looking out to see what's going on. Habitat for Humanity, for example, is one of their things they're involved with. They have $40,000 in debt, so a negligible debt. Again, so there's opportunities. They aren't paying a huge amount of money every month for a mortgage. They're involved with a campus ministry up in Fort Collins.
Campus ministries.
Yep.
Campus ministries.
Yep. At the university.
Their membership and worship attendance is pretty much stable, but the community is growing. That's an interesting dynamic. So membership growth may or may not be a worship attendance growth hasn't seemed to be and things happen at least. So community is growing quite a bit. What else do you want to add?
That's the group. What else would you add?
The community is white, 90% white.
Congregation?
90% white.
Both. Yeah?
Yeah.
Congregation might be even more white.
But not that much.
I'll put 90 plus. How about that?
Yeah.
What else?
They're doing better after the leadership change.
Yeah, say something about that. How did you catch that? That's true. How did you catch that?
So they had a significant downturn.
Yeah.
By the same report was filed 3 years in a row.
It's water. I'll clean it up again.
So same report was filed 3 years in a row, which isn't true. They threw off all the dead members, so it looked like there was a huge decrease, but it wasn't. It was just the new pastors coming in.
Yep.
And then since then, it looks like it's active and faithful and concentrated on their membership.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote that we all love. You found the one kid who said, "I could hardly wait until it was my turn to be in confirmation."
Said it for real. She was the youngest of 3 folks and thank you, Gia, could hard,
Evaluation, meeting confirmation. So they're doing a good job
Right.
with their faith formation.
and it's her
intergenerational.
grandma that's the mentor in the first story.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, this part, this cultivating community came because there was nothing.
Yeah.
It was depressed before that with the pastoral leadership. And so part of that was to wake them up and make them like each other again or whatever, you know.
Faith 5 incubators.
Heavy into faith, faith 5, the 5 parts of faith incubators, they actually, their second service actually uses that as their worship format, which is very interesting.
Speak,
It's,
pray.
Yeah.
No, share, read, talk, pray, and bless.
so they use that as their kind of backbone for all of their faith formation things, and they intersect things. So it's kind of a simple framework, but
there's
it,
a division.
what?
There was a serious division in the community.
Yes, and I don't know what it was. It wasn't a sexual misconduct or something like that. It was just flat.
It didn't like financial scrutiny either. Couldn't see anything there. But in 2000, the worship attendance was 355. In 2003, it was 213. They dropped to 140 members in 3 years. And then
Right.
05, 06, 07, identical numbers, no new reports. And then 08, there's 240 members cut off the rolls. And worship attendance is 202, and it's grown to 230 since then. So it's grown a little bit, but it's basically stable.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's significantly less than it was in 2000. And it didn't correlate with the 09 vote.
No,
or
correct.
the 08
Right.
economic downturn or some of these things.
It was its own deal.
It was its own
Yeah.
internal thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, this is right across from a school. And what's probably not in that part of your report, because it comes later, is they actually have adopted the school. And they found that there's a hearing impaired needs there. They children from there, so they've actually created a ministry to partner with that and have created, there's earpieces that they bought and they purchased those, and they have a very now vibrant outreach with literally their neighbor.
Well, one of the kids was doing her Bible verse in ASL.
Yeah.
In church. Oh.
Yeah. Very interesting. So what is your sense about this church? Would you go to this church, some of you? Would you serve here? Why not?
I think there's a great opportunity for outreach and growth with the church.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be a interesting reason to go there, or like something that would be interesting about serving there.
Yeah. And where would you see the growth in?
The 60% non-affiliated.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
there is so much that
Yeah.
you can reach out to that it doesn't have anything really right now. So.
Right. And to like people that maybe have never been in church, right? I mean, not just the stealing from the next church over, right? Kind of thing. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable going to this kind of church. And there are about 733 members, 733, and only one black is right here.
Yeah, it's basically one ethnic group,
Yeah,
right?
Maybe a lot of challenge from that.
Yep. 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 Somebody remember the context of Loveland? Did you find that what
90% white.
yeah, but other than that, what's represented?
Small Latino community.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
So that would be the other
10%.
Yeah.
That's Latino.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, those are both more urban areas. This is a small town away from an urban area, right? That has different kind of dynamics to that. Thank you for offering that. What else? Who else has an opinion about this place?
I like the outdoors, being that close to mountains.
Right.
It'll be interesting that way. And it is always that and who else is out there, and then how do you shape church? We Lutherans are really good at doing church for people who already know church.
Right.
We're not so good at doing church for
Right.
people who don't know church.
Right.
And that would be an interesting challenge.
Yeah, that would kind of piggybacking on that comment. What would it be like to reimagine church with people that have chosen to be here out in this part, to be away from other folks and to some other things?
And then the authentic community, I think.
Yep.
And the cross-generational piece, I think is really built on.
Yeah.
And churches are one of those few places where you get 4 or 5 generations together,
Right.
interacting.
Right.
And you totally maybe 2 generations, work a couple generations, but that whole breadth, churches are one of the few places, and to build on that interaction.
One of the partnerships they do have is with outdoor ministry. They utilize that a lot, and it's doable. I think it's a couple hours from where they are because it's so close. So that is something that is an asset, right? That could be used for ministry, not just recreation, right? With regard to that. 3 different kinds of opportunities to serve, right? People struggling with and finding some forward motion into dealing with the challenges and opportunities, okay? Good work, you guys. Let me just ask a couple questions. Was this helpful to do to kind of figure out how do we interpret data? Where do we go? What kind of curiosity and questions? What is some, I mean, I hope maybe some of you saw the data one way and somebody else said, well, I see it another, and you got to talk it out a little bit about what's real, what's potential, what's challenge, right? Right? So was this helpful as a way to begin to kind of think about now your job, if you will, for the next paper is to do the outreach, the outward facing kinds of things from your ministry context, right? And wonder how does this community discern its relationship, right, to the neighborhood? Does that make sense? That's kind of the question that we're getting you to think about. All right, let's take 15 minutes and we'll come back and just do a small piece on Moltmann, and then we'll be done for the day. I'm going to pause you. Oh, we've been paused the whole time. No?
Me.
All right. Let's talk about God. Can we do that? What a concept. What?
I hope not. Wrong place.
So all right, I took pictures of these, you guys. I'll put this online if anybody cares. But you never know, it might be called there somewhere. It might be. Well, I'll just say this. You guys did a nice job playing with this. I was just telling Tim, part of my getting rid of some readings and slowing us down and doing more interaction is that I'd rather you dwell in a few of these concepts and get them more deeply than us to cover too fast, all right? And so thank you for engaging each other and learning with each other, because I think not only is it, well, first of all, I think as an ELCA person, I love to know that there's actually some congregations doing work that it's interesting to hear about, even though there's still a lot more to be done. So some of that's just getting hopeful about people that are engaging their context, but also learning from and with each other by doing hands-on stuff rather than just reading all the time is more interesting to me anyway. So, but so as we move into this piece, Bea, I'm gonna thank you for that question on mission. We're gonna play with that a little bit now. Okay, we were just talking a little bit around we get loose with like the word church. We use it to mean a lot of things, right? It means worship, it means a building, it means a body of people, it means a denomination, it means the institutional, decision makers, well, that's church-wide, or that's somebody else over there, right? As we talk about church. And so part of what I want us to do around is that sake of mission, all right? And so in this course and at this seminary, there's a whole bunch of people that would like you to entertain, at least for this course, live into it for a little while, a Trinitarian understanding of God's mission. Okay? And early on, we talked about that often we saw a Western view, a Western Trinitarian view, said God had a mission, God sent Jesus, right, into the world to be the mission, right? Go dwell among them, whatever, and lived in the world, right? That was a good thing. And then God sent the Spirit, right, to be the advocate, to be sustainer, to be the one moving forward. And then God created the church, and now we're sent to do the work. Does that make sense? So it's kind of one, then this, then this, then this. Does that make sense? Very linear, right? Not how creative people think, is it, Joe? Not at all. Not here, right? So this sense of then, well, I don't know if Western, we just like categories. I don't know if we like, equations or whatever. But this is how a lot of us have maybe been taught to think about a Trinitarian understanding of God, right? There's sending God, and it kind of comes in this order.
Or just don't think about it.
Or we don't think about it at all. That's true. But an Eastern understanding of the Trinity is much more like this. This is open, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at, right? A sense where God, Jesus, and the Spirit are in relationship with one another, right? There's this mutual, that's what we're going to talk more about here today. And this God opens God's self to the world by choice. Not because God's imperfect, but because God says this is a relationship of love, and part of love is the dynamic of back and forth mutuality, right? And so God says, I am going to limit myself, to open myself to creation, to be in relationship, and for that dynamic, right? God doesn't say, you will be in relationship with me, like me, right? That's not very mutual, right? So this Eastern understanding is the one that we're going to talk about today. Does that help you put where we are? Okay. And this is a pretty, Moltmann has more to say than this article. Moltmann likes to write, okay? But this has been kind of the steady, kind of consistent piece that minimally we would like seminarians to have an understanding of. All right? So we're going to just touch on that as we end our time here today. So perichoresis. This perichoresis is this sense of what is this Eastern view of the Trinity kind of look like, okay? And then Moltmann is kind of breaking that open with a different kind of way of thinking about it. He didn't begin it. He's dealing with it more in closer to our time than back where it came from. But he said, we can experience different times in the same place. What does that mean? We can experience different times in the same place. Give me an example of that.
This classroom.
We meet every Monday in the same space, but it's not the same day of the year in 2017. And Beth is in a different seat.
A lot of people aren't. Mary's in the same one.
But even though Mary's in the same seat, it's a different day. Something different happened over the weekend, right? She maybe had something different for lunch. Maybe, I don't know. All right, so we can experience different times in the same place. Any of you ever gone back to a place that has meaning as a just kind of a memory thing, you know? Soft to your heart, or it holds you, right? And sometimes you're disappointed, and sometimes it's life-giving, right? Okay. But not different places at the same time. We try virtually to be at two places at once, right? But that's still a bit harder, right? Moms, if we could figure that out, we would be in wouldn't we? We'd be in different, like, yeah, anyway, all right. In space, like this, we exist beside each other. Look to your right, look to your left. Virtually, look to your right, look to your left. All right, there you go. All right. And together. But in time, we exist after one another. So we leave and another group comes in. There's a different thing that happens in time. In space, simultaneously. In time, successively, right? One after the other. Thus, we miss the reality of God, creation, and our own bodily existence if we only experience them in time. What the heck does that mean? We're not going to spend a whole half hour on this one sentence, I promise, right? Why do we miss God if we only exist in time?
We have different appearances on the scene. Take, for instance, generational appearance. It's not going to be the same.
Right.
And so we all not have the same experience.
Right.
It's one group after another.
Yeah.
And that we're not dwell together.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are things that are passed through time, right? But there's also things that space gives us, right? I come back on Wednesdays and have communion in the same space and experience God differently in that space over time. Like there's something that on Wednesday, I know it's communion, I come in or whatever, right? There's something about space or with the same people, right? That I'm sharing a space with that allows me to be in a place, right? So his point here is hang on, let me finish this, not going to do, is what does it mean to both be in connecting, thinking about God in time, over time, and in space, in locations? Why have a building? There may be something. Why have a home? Why have certain things around us that help create an atmosphere, right? Beth?
Space is more material from matter, and it's a bodily existence. The incarnateness of Jesus, the reality of creation matters to me. I interact with more in the spatial dimension than the temporal dimension. So that's God in space brings that matter piece. Matter matters, to quote Evan Sugarbaker.
Matter does matter.
But that matter piece is more in space for me.
Right. Why did it matter that Jesus came and dwelt in space? Right?
And time, but yes.
Right. But came and dwelt, hung out. Right? Any of you ever known a friend, met someone, and then got to go to their home? And you're like, this totally explains a lot. No, good, bad, and different, like, I don't know, right? Right? There's something different about going to someone's space and then going, or being embodied with their relationships in that space. Meeting the parents, or meeting their kids, or meeting their whatever, right? Their neighbors, or whoever is important, right? In that, right? So what if we think about God dwelling with us in time and space, okay? That's the first point that I want you to take away. We ourselves cannot exist in time only. You have to bring your body with you, okay? And this is an interesting point. Hastening through the accelerated speed of our modern, already postmodern world into the future. Part of what I just finished article for Word and World that says this: people long for space to be in our accelerated world. If we have a gift to this accelerated rate of being world that's happening around us, and we say, let's come and be in time, like let's let time be over there and be with one another. We then get a chance to connect back with ourselves, each other, and God. And that we need space for. We need the actual physicality of being one with another, right? We put a bunch of students in a van and drove to Iowa, right? Being in a van together, right? Traveling together made a difference, right? Being together, okay? We must also dwell in our bodies and with our senses linger in the sensual world of nature and find rest again and again in the peace of God. We cannot only struggle against one another in a hostile world, but we must also live together and make home in neighborhoods, with our friendships, in love. We can only live and breathe freely if we have given one another space to live our lives. So our family traveled this weekend to DC to this wedding, and we did all these things that we were supposed to do. And we got home, and we had all been traveling a little bit different timelines. And let's just say we weren't all on the same page when we got home. Our bodies were all physically back in Minnesota, right? But it was like we all had different experiences because we all had different expectations, different needs that were met or not met or whatever. And we had to recalibrate. We needed space in our family. I'm living with these people. I would like to be able to talk with them, right? To figure out what is going on, right? Do you know what I'm talking about here, folks? It's one thing with the people that we have covenanted to be in relationship with, our friends, our family. It's another thing to do that with literally our neighbors or others around that may not have that same sense of commitment to you to figure it out, right? And so part of what Moltmann is encouraging us is to say, what does it mean or what is our role as people of God to say part of our job is to make space to be one with those around us. And that is harder and harder to do as the world gets faster in different kinds of commitments, right? So this is not a new thing. It's just there's some different challenges. In his essay, he explores the implications of our deepened conviction that all life is community in community. So God's life is community in community. God is a communal self. Now this is weird to talk about, and it's always weird to write a paper. God and God's self, right? But God is a community. Creator, Redeemer, Sanctifier, Spirit, Advocate. God, in God's self, we say in the Apostles' Creed and every other creed, we believe in a God of community. God is only God in relationship to God's self and the world. So we, as people of faith, people of God, have to also be that. So what does it mean that all life is community in community? Complicated, I think, is what it means, right? There's an ancient concept of community without uniformity. Part of the issue we have here is to say, I want to be in community with y'all, but all come be like me, right? That's not community, right? And V, can I hear an amen? The church has gotten real good at that. But that's not community, right? That's part of what we need to repent from, to use our dwelling text, right? Community is a different thing. And so part of what I really appreciate in this article is, like, if you haven't printed this out or saved it to your computer, do this. This is an article in my work I go back to time and time again. It's like a dwelling text. I'm like, that's right, I forgot that's in this article too. Right. Yeah, Stacy.
He also has a book that touches on this spirit.
Yep. Did you hear that? Spirit Life is also another resource. Thank you, Stacy, for that. So, community without uniformity. And personality without individualism. And this term is called perichoresis. So what Moltmann is suggesting is, what does it mean for the church to be community without uniformity? We have a center, and that's God's love. But we don't say you have to be like me. And guess what, church? Some of us have not done this very well. We have not looked at the center of what defines us. We've looked at the edges, the gatekeeping, right? And to say, no, here's the uniformity. Here's the way you have to be like us, right? So this puts a lot of pressure. And Moltmann's kind of not a bad guy to throw out at people. Like, he kind of holds his own as a theologian. Expanding on this idea, Moltmann offers a Trinitarian understanding of God. And here's what he says: the inhabitation of the Spirit, the human community. So the Spirit's coming in, right? The human community, right? And the community of culture and nature, those have to be in sync to be a sustainable community. Somebody said, what's sustainable, right? This is Moltmann, right? These are the things that have to be working together. Holy Spirit, come. Okay, anybody know the Lois Malcolm perichoresis dance?
Yeah.
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 Do it. All right, here. If you, oh, there we go. We got one online. Right? Okay.
I really need to see this. This is new for me.
All right, here. We're going to do it. You two, you did it really well. Carla would like to see it one more time. Okay. All right, here we go. There we go.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, and then if you're Joe, you get a beat going and there's feet moving, and
that was transformational.
That was transformational. Wow, way to go. That's pretty exciting. Like, you can't ask for much more than that on a Monday afternoon, right? So we got a little perichoresis going on. Perichoresis literally means this. These are words to describe it. Whirl or rotation, right? Like those of us in Minnesota on a fall day when the wind is swirling and you see the leaves going like this, that's what I imagine when I read that, right? Like, and it's just this force. Like, it looks like it's moving. It looks like it's magic, but it's not, right? Going from one to another, walking around. So there literally was a time when people would walk around like a community, right? As a way of support or whatever. There's a church that I went to in Washington, D.C. on Sunday, and it started because the pastor felt called to an area of Washington, D.C., and he spent months walking around the neighborhood praying, God, what would you have me do? What would you have me do? And it was literally in circles. And they started by opening a coffee shop. And then from that, it grew, and now there are, I don't know, 7 campuses of this ministry. But it starts with walking the neighborhood and praying for God, how would you have us do ministry in this place, right? So that's another piece, right? Encircling, embracing, enclosing, not enclosing like this, but a sense of embracing a place, right? Of coming alongside an environment, like an ecosystem, right? That has to work together with covenant. And every time I just can't do it without my hands, and I'm not even Lois Malcolm. So perichoresis comes from it's given credit to Gregory of, I don't know how to say his last name, used it first theologically, but John of Damascus is the one that's kind of often the one that's most talked about, used it as a key word for his Christology and the doctrine of the Trinity. So John of Damascus is often the one that there's more reading about. And here the term is used to express mutual interpenetration, the sense of the different persons of the Trinity, right, are penetrating their different natures, but they are all in communication. They're all within and through one another, okay? Expanding this understanding and then drawing from the Latin translation, mutual indwelling or habitatable, that's habitatable, yeah, of one another, giving one another space, giving one another open life space for their mutual indwelling. Gia, I have young adults that I have to parent. Can you relate to that? Yes. Yeah. There is no way I have found to parent young adults by closing off their space. Would that be, am I alone in that? No, right? So the trick is, I have found, parenting young adults, is to open space and to dwell together, right? And stick with each other through this growth, right? Through this time. That's an image for me of what it is. I mean, I tried to open it up space when they were 3, but 3, they also run in the street and they like put their hand on the stove and they burn their hands and they, there's other things that the space is a little smaller, right? But what does it mean to be in relationship with others that leans into the other, but not in a way that says, here's your little window that we can relate to one another, but leans into them with an open kind of posture and says, where shall we go with this, right? What would life-giving space for us be together? What might God be calling us to? I mean, here's where being with someone more different than more alike is far more interesting. At least for me. Harder work? Totally. Are you going to screw up? Probably. Are you going to put your foot in your mouth? Quite likely. Right? But also the sense of, what does this say? First of all, God is bigger than any frame any category, any definition, any paper I can write, any book I can read. God is bigger than anything my brain can handle. That's almost an amen, don't you think? Amen. Okay. And so what if part of my encountering you is a way of opening myself to say, tell me more about God, Joe. You see God differently. You see God in pictures and rhyme and story and in places that I'm not at. You tell me how you see God. And can I do the same with you? Right? I bet Joe would say yes. Yeah. And so this is the kind of place that it says, a perichoretic understanding of God sees each person indwelling and room giving at the same time. Right? And this, hang on and I'll finish this. And this is those corrupt people that we read about, as well as the ones that might look like safe, right? Like, you all look weird, but you're all in seminary, so you've had to pass an admissions thing or whatever, right? We can easily put our gates around But God's saying, what does it mean to go mutually dwell on the streets, in parks, on the bus, on the airplane, wherever you find yourself, right? Beth?
We are simultaneously guests and hosts.
We are
I think
simultaneously.
that's kind of
Well,
church language.
yep. There's a few people around here that have been using that, but he's one of them, for sure. Yeah. Ralph is playing with a lot of that. At this time, they are teaching together. They may have been influencing each other, right? And what is it that draws us together? It's not me. Because you know what? I'm going to screw up, remember? Pretty confident in that, right? But it's God. It's drawing together in love. The divine persons are giving each other themselves and the divine life of selfless love. God doesn't say, Terry, I knew you would screw up. I just have been trying to tell you, would you just stop doing that? Right? God just shows up and said, how you doing? Right? We're theoretical today more than anything because we're running out of time. But I want you to deeply think about if even a third of what Moltmann says is true, right? This is a different way of being church than most of our congregations are currently practicing. And some of that, I think, begins where we started, with our own repentance of saying, you know, we got caught up in other stuff, and this isn't about blaming and shaming and name calling. This is about who are we called to be in relationship with, and what kind of body of Christ, right? If the church is following what God has us do, then what does this mean for us moving forward, today and into the future? That, for me, is the pivotal question of this course. We're going to lead Christian communities. Lead them by how your understanding is of God. And we are suggesting that this kind of mutual indwelling between God with God's self, where God opens God's self to the world and says, I want to be in relationship with you. I want to be in relationship with all of creation. Then what then does it mean for us as we live this out? So part of why we want you to understand not only what's happening internally in a congregation, but also its neighborhood, to say one of the places that we dwell is in physical space. And what does it mean to be in relationship with the space of which we find ourselves, not only the time? Does that help you? Yeah. That probably 3 minutes is probably the, you know, if there's a Cliff Note version, there's the 3 minutes of what's this course about, right? All these things are about that. All right. Questions, wonderings, comments? What are practices that you know of the church or have experienced in Christian community that help us do that? Like, we can probably name all the things we do wrong. Like, we could have a pretty big chalkboard full of that. But what are some practices that you have found to be helpful and centering, right? Kind of grounding us in this kind of community?
I always think that, like, meal sharing.
Yeah, say more about that, Joe.
Food always brings you together.
And
So
why
I
is
think
that? I agree with you.
everybody has to eat, right?
Yeah.
But I think around food too. I mean, you look at the table, the communion table, or even beyond that, other instances where we break bread together. Yeah. We're able to have that time where we, share intimate conversation and kind of embody that like relational way of being. When there's food involved. So.
Well, and I think that's an image that you can go a long way with, right? Mm-hmm. There's something about when you're in meal, where you sit mutually,
Yeah.
alongside. There's not, you don't have to have the all over you or, right?
Yeah.
There's the sense that we can move to storytelling and sharing of ourselves in a way that we can create some safety. Not always, right? But there is that ability to have some practices. Have any of you, let's push that one a little bit. Had communion table or other tables, like our kitchen table, we try and do that in our house, right? We have guests that show up, mostly invited, sometimes not, in the sense that somebody's friends over or whatever, and you just eat if you're at our house. That's just how it goes, right? And that's, I don't know. My mom did that, my grandparents did that, I just do it, right? There are some things that are good that you don't have to think about too much. But what is it? Have you experienced what that is in some places? And let's talk about that. Because it sounds so simple, but I don't think it's always that simple, right?
What causes you to stop, like to lay everything else down, to actually say, when I have, with me and the kids, there's 6 of us, right? And so everybody has like lives and agendas and worries and schedules. So for me to say, listen, I don't care where you go to school, I don't care how far you are, Sunday nights at 5 o'clock, we're going to get together, requires some intentionality. And for people to actually have to make the sacrifice. They call it sacrifice. Right? To be in the space. To be in the space. And I think that could be, that is challenging for some people. Is I'm going to leave all this here and I'm going to make this a priority. To do this.
So it's saying no. So you can say yes.
Right.
So it's having some draw to want to be there. Okay. What else?
I think it forces us. It forces us to talk. It forces us to communicate. So like in my family, we're all very busy. So we get to sit down at the table maybe twice a week. But with a busy schedule, even then, those 2 days is like playing catch up. And even though sometimes it feels like pulling teeth. So how was your day at school? So how was your week? So what did you do? What didn't you do? But it's almost like TV's off. And there are times that I'm not even hungry because since I'm cooking, I'm already munching. I was like, I got stuff to do. And I would sit and eat just for the sake of this is the time where we sit, we eat, and we talk. And so I think it's the same thing. It's very intentional. Even if when you meet with others in community, even if the only thing that gets you is free meal. Oh God, good, I don't have to cook, or free meal. Once you sit down, whatever the space, whatever the energy is that you put out, people are going to feed into it because they're already there and they're already eating. And it's just like, well, even if I didn't want to, I might as well because I'm here. And even if you don't engage, you're still sitting down and listening to everybody else. So even when you think you're not engaging, you're still going to leave that space with something that you didn't come in with.
Well, and I love in that way, isn't it like God crafted our bodies so our souls could be fed too, right? I like what you said, V, about, like there's this physical part that you got to just get it done, right? But if we actually can craft some space, create some kind of parameters or some things that say, this is actually life-giving. I left not only with my stomach full, but my soul, my relationships, I love to watch practices happen here at seminary when people have left other communities of which they had practices, the ones that live at some point of time, whether it's an intensive kind of week or, are here like we used to have some students that would come for like 2 days a week, here 48 hours or whatever, or people that live here, This sense of being in community often happen around the necessity to eat and then build relationality. Let's build some practices, some rituals around that,
I'm thinking about times where that table is not as welcoming.
Talk about that.
And dietary issues is part of it.
Yep, for sure.
If you're gluten intolerant,
Right.
if you're vegetarian, if you're lactose intolerant,
right.
Well, sometimes those meals aren't very friendly.
Right.
When I bake for my home congregation Sunday morning coffee hour, coffee being optional, I always have a gluten-free option. And that's not that, and at least half people don't bother. But I always have a gluten-free option because it's not hospitable if you can't eat anything. Nothing there for you.
Well,
and I can go to Cub and buy a mix and it's easy.
Right. Well, and some of that, right, is sometimes, I guess, Gian mostly knows who's showing up at her house on Sunday, right? Some of that's knowing your community and tailoring it. But I bet, V, you know what people like and don't like, and you're going to do your best to have a range of options for people. Maybe? Oh, she's not going to. I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just saying.
Don't even look over here. I didn't say anything at all.
I was saying, well, I was just laughing because I'm a very difficult person right now since I don't eat meat. And it's very hard for me to go to community meals.
Right.
Because it's always chicken, beef, or pork, and those are the 3 types of meats that I don't eat.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying at your house, though, right? I'm
But
saying
in
at
your
your house, right? You're thinking about that for the people that you're welcoming, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was giving you a softball, girl, right?
It's like good
Right?
vegetarian
But
is full of cheese.
so there's this one option, right? If you know the people, that's my point, right? It's another thing if it's a wide public, right? And you're like, I have no clue who's coming and what to make. It's another thing if you've got a semi-public, right?
My cousin married a vegetarian, so now Thanksgiving has changed.
Right.
All the recipes that used to have chicken broth in them, they've been changed.
Right.
Oh, wow.
But there's an opportunity though. Then you have to be guest host. You have to wonder,
And
right?
we have to think and be creative. That's kind of fun.
Right.
Is for me.
Well, and I think that what you're saying is important when you're talking about the food.
Yeah.
Hospitality, but also like conversation. May not
For
be
sure.
welcoming.
That's for sure.
Perspectives and values. May
Why
not
is
be
everybody
welcoming,
talking in code?
Right?
Everybody at Luther Seminary talks in code, don't you think?
I've actually
3 letters for everything. What do they mean? Yeah, Mary.
Another thing that I was thinking about while we were on is that sometimes that table setting in a banquet, a church event, or some gathering, Christian gathering, is not welcoming because it gets to be an interrogation process for 1 or 2 people.
Yes, that's,
Who are
yes.
sitting at that table.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if it is a person of color and the others are white, it seems that the focus is what do you do, how do you know this person, and it's just so uncomfortable versus keeping our minds focused on why we're there and being that community within oneself, within that gathering that we're speaking about. So when you said that, I have been thinking about it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I'm also thinking about family dynamics.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that too.
Well, I'm sure my kids would say that I just said it's true and that things also.
Yeah,
No, I'm-
my
I mean,
my
I'm adding
kids
that on
warn
to
people when they're coming to the first time they meet Grandpa.
Yeah.
He's got a list, just so you know.
Yeah.
Grandpa's going to ask you these questions. He'll do it once and then you'll be done, right? But thank you. Good engagement today. We'll be back next week. Same place, different time. Right? See you Thursday night.
Is anybody going to?
I will let you know if I can get a link to the electronic.
Thank you.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Have a good day, you guys.
Thank
you.